Radha, you've been everywhere, you've done everything. You were half of FAANG, Meta, Amazon, Google, Twitter. You're now at a VC firm. Looking back on your career, achieving what you wanted, what contributed to that success? And let us know if you've got any secrets that you've learned along the way to help you get there.
I have two core principles which I think are super important. And then I can talk about my approach in terms of like how my secrets. I think there are three secrets. So I can talk about these two. I think in terms of principles, which is like the foundation of what I believe in, are two things. Number one, resilience, and number two, being able to learn constantly. Resilience. I think resilience is probably the biggest marker of success in my view because resilience is about. I define resilience as one's ability to constantly go at it, to be able to continue learning, continue trying new things, and not be faced by failure, and to be able to bounce back and to keep trying. That for me is resilience, and I think that's the biggest marker of success because the people who really, I mean, we've all heard of so many successful people just like coming from very simple backgrounds and really hustling their way through, really working hard and not being faced by failure, but learning and trying something new, making these bold bets and challenging themselves constantly. And at times, I think we lose perspective. We focus too much on their successes and we forget to look at their journeys. So most successful people, like the stellar successes that we see, they've all had this journey of resilience. And I think it's not about, we might think that they were probably born with it, or they have some secret, but I think the biggest secret of success is resilience. The second piece is to be able to learn constantly. I think which kind of links back to resilience as well, but specifically I think to be able to learn from everything one is doing. And a lot of us, we believe we're lifelong learners, and but I think a good test of that is how do we deal with changes are inevitable, right? Big and small changes are going to be a part of life, and how can we embrace the change, however uncomfortable that is, and what can we learn from there? How can we get better the next day as compared to how we were the day before? And doing that, I think, very seamlessly, doing that, I think, in a very natural, fun way with a lot of curiosity, I think that goes a long way. And that powers the resilience as well, because instead of making resilience this uphill climbing job, just kind of approaching it with a levity and curiosity and fun, I think goes a long way in being successful. Um, so those are my core principles. I think I like to believe that I think if one has these two components in place, a lot of things, success is just a matter of time. In terms of my hard-earned lessons, I think it might sound a little bit philosophical, but that I would again, like, because I like the number three. The three lessons that I've learned are the why, when, and how. I think just being super clear on the why, when, and how is, I think, like game changing. It's been game changing for me. Why is the purpose of, let's say, my career, my life, and being very clear about who I am and what I want to do. I think anchoring everything on that has just, been super game changing for me, just to have this clarity. And it doesn't have to be a big word. Purpose just sounds like this very huge thing. You have to sit under a tree and you realize your purpose. It doesn't have to be all of that, and it doesn't have to be cast in stone. Just knowing that this makes sense to me and this makes me happy at my core, and this is something that speaks to me, and it can change tomorrow, but for today this is my purpose, and this is what I'm going to focus on and work towards. I think just having that clarity anchors oneself very firmly. The second aspect is when. I think once you have the purpose defined, I've been able to unearth a lot of energy to go and get things done now. At times, I've had this tendency to kind of put away things saying that I'm probably not ready for it. I wanted to be an entrepreneur very early on in my career, but I felt like, oh, I don't know what is out there. I feel I don't have the skills. I probably have to wait it out. And, because we fear the unknown and we feel like we're not ready. So I think once I figured out my purpose, I think I've been able to go for it and have the conviction that I'll be able to learn along the way. So I think, and this is something people might not understand. Like people around you might be like, "Oh, why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense to me." And they could have a different point of view, but I think uh, you need to know that the time is now. And the question to ask is, if I were to do it today, because I know that this is what I want to do, how can I make it happen today? What steps can I take today to get closer to that rather than leave it for tomorrow? Rather than go for an ideal, well defined path as per conventional wisdom, how can I chart out that path for me today? I think that's a very powerful question. Even though if it's uncomfortable, there are lots of unknowns, but I think just starting with that question makes a ton of difference as to when. The when is now. And finally, how, right? Okay, how do you make plans? How do you make this happen? So I think just being kind of very scrappy in one's approach and kind of having the honesty to understand what's going on and remove the judgments and figure things along the way. I think that again, I believe, makes a ton of difference. So why? Start with a why. Look at when, and the answer is now, and then you'll figure out the how. How is sitting there waiting for you to figure it out.
You mentioned risk and failing, and I want to probe there a little bit because some can say, I'm really good at my academics. I work hard. I get into the schools that I want. I get into the jobs that I want. And I'm sure you've seen this in your around you, that people who excelled up to a certain point, when they get into a team with so many smart people, there's a lot of struggle that come out. There's a lot of insecurities and lack of confidence because you realize, oh my gosh, there are so many people that are so smart. So have you experienced that yourself? Have you experienced by how do you get comfortable with something like failing and trying new things when you know there are things that you can hold on to that will give you a bit more comfort?
Yeah, I love that question because I would say one big companion in my life, probably a companion I haven't wanted, is the imposter syndrome. I've always had that. I think it started from me being this gawky teenager because I felt like I was very different and I probably stood out in ways I didn't want to stand out for at every step, getting into an engineering college, a top engineering college in my state, to getting to the best business school in India, to working with these top employers, working in different geographies. I think countless number of times I've felt like an imposter. I felt like, oh my God, especially in cross cultural settings, that I don't belong. My accent is so different. I look so different. And being the only female voice in many rooms, I just felt very underconfident. I just didn't feel like I belonged. But I would say, I think the thing to keep in mind is failing is going to be a part of the journey. I think we can optimize for it, optimize for succeeding constantly, but that just means we wouldn't grow because we would end up doing the things that we know very well. But that's not where growth happens. So I think the regret of not doing something is going to be far higher than doing something and failing, despite the imposter syndrome, despite feeling like, I probably don't belong, or, oh my God, this seems very challenging. This is so much of pain and struggle. I think it's worthwhile to still go and try. I am today where I would have never imagined in my wildest dreams, and I do have a long way to go. And I would say the single biggest thing that has helped me get here is kind of embracing failure. And it doesn't matter how many failures one has, you just need few successes.
I think there's so much to unpack here. Number one, I think you pointed out, was failing is okay. That's just something we have to get comfortable with if we want to grow, because actually the learning happens when we're uncomfortable. But I think the second thing, which I also find difficult sometimes, is I failed, but I don't know exactly what my takeaway was. I think, and that to me comes in a few different ways. One side is probably psychological. I want to blame someone else and try to protect myself from saying, oh, I was stupid, I couldn't figure this out. So that part, to me, exists, and it's hard to overcome, to say, okay, I can't blame anyone. I need to take responsibility. That's one thing. And the other thing is figuring out exactly what happened that attributed to the failures, because sometimes there's so many factors that are involved. It's hard to tease them apart and figure out, what am I really learning from the failures. Do you have any examples or any tips for others when they do fail? How can they get the most out of that experience?
I love that question. So, I would offer three things here. I think first is being able to deal with the failure emotionally. I think the second piece is to be able to figure out a good way to learn from the failure. And finally, the third piece is get comfortable with failure being a part of the journey. So, going back to the first two things, dealing with failure, I think this again links back to how one looks at failure, right? Like failure sucks every single time. Let's make no bones about it. Nobody wants to fail. It hurts our ego. We put in a lot of effort, lots of earnestness, and when it doesn't go our way, it obviously sucks. The way I deal with it personally is to really, I think, move on to action, move on to what I can do with the failure. Dealing with the psychology of failing is to really put things into perspective and try to focus on the next steps. And in terms of how one can learn from the failure, it's to really, I think, be honest with oneself and look at what one did well in that situation, what one could have done better, and what the next steps are, based on, I think, our own analysis, and also based on inputs from people we trust. That typically works for me.